They say money doesn't change people, it only reveals who they truly are. But that day, sitting in the lawyer's office, I realized money could also destroy everything you thought you knew about family. Before I dive into this, make sure you subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious, what would you have done if you were in my place? My name is Jasper, and this is the story of how my life collapsed and then rebuilt itself in the most unexpected way. The air in the room was heavy, not because it was hot but because every eye was fixed on the mahogany desk where the lawyer shuffled papers. My father had passed away only 3 weeks earlier. We had buried him on a rainy Tuesday, and though grief still lingered in the air, it was now drowned out by greed. I watched my brother, Trevor, sitting across from me. He had that smug smile plastered on his face, the kind he always wore whenever he thought he was winning. My mother sat beside him, her hand resting on his arm as if to remind me whose side she had chosen long ago. I was alone on my side of the table, a shadow in a family that had already written me off. The lawyer cleared his throat. According to the last will and testament of Mr. Harrison, his voice droned on, and I leaned forward, bracing myself. I hereby leave to my son Trevor the sum of $75 million, a Tesla Model S, and the family estate in Westwood. The room erupted in soft gasps, though not from surprise. Trevor's grin widened, my mother patted his arm. My chest tightened as though invisible hands were squeezing my ribs. $75 million. A luxury car. A mansion. All to him. I waited for the lawyer to continue, for my name to finally be spoken. But he shuffled the last page, adjusted his glasses, and with a finality that crushed me said, "This concludes the reading of the will." The silence that followed was louder than thunder. My pulse hammered in my ears. That was it? Nothing for me? Not even a photograph, a token, a memory? I looked at Trevor. He didn't even bother hiding his triumph. His eyes said it all. You were never the favorite. You were never enough. My throat tightened. "Excuse me," I managed to say, though my voice cracked. Is there a mistake? My name wasn't even mentioned." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the papers. "This is the final signed and notarized document, Mr. Harrison." "I'm sorry." Sorry. As if that word could mend the wound splitting me in half. I stood, my chair scraping against the polished floor. My mother avoided my eyes, pretending to fuss with her purse. Trevor leaned back, smugness dripping from his posture. I could almost hear the unspoken words, "Get used to being nothing." I left the office in a haze. The sun outside was blinding, mocking me with its warmth. My brother had inherited a fortune that could buy entire neighborhoods, and I was left with empty pockets and an even emptier heart. I walked aimlessly through the streets, replaying every memory of my father. The way he had taught me to ride a bike, the way he had once said I was his pride. Had that all been a lie? How had Trevor become the golden son while I became the forgotten one? By the time I reached the corner of Maple and Fifth, the anger inside me had curdled into something darker. That was when it happened. A man I didn't recognize stepped out from the shadows of a bookstore. He was tall, wearing a dark coat despite the warm afternoon. His eyes locked onto mine, sharp and deliberate. "You're Jasper Harrison," he said, not asked but stated as fact. I froze. "Yes. And you are?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. A plain, cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. He extended it toward me. "This," he said, his voice low and certain, "was meant for you." I hesitated. My hand shook as I took it. The weight of the envelope felt heavier than paper should. Inside, something shifted, the faint sound of documents sliding together. "Who are you?" I asked again. But the man only gave me a knowing look, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as if he had never been there. I stared at the envelope in my hands, my pulse racing. My father had left me nothing, at least nothing official. But this envelope, this could change everything. I tore at the seal with trembling fingers, desperate to know what was inside. And when I saw the first page, my breath caught in my throat. Because what I held in my hands wasn't just paper. It was power. I stood there on the corner of Maple and Fifth with that envelope burning in my hand like a live coal. My brother had just been crowned king of our father's empire with $75 million, a Tesla, and a mansion. I had been erased. But now, this fragile envelope felt like a key slipped to me by fate itself. I ducked into a quiet cafe across the street. The clinking of cups and low chatter blended into white noise as I slid into a booth and laid the envelope on the table. My fingers hovered over the seal, hesitant. For a moment, I wondered if it was some cruel trick, if Trevor had orchestrated this just to humiliate me further. But no. The man's eyes had been too steady, his voice too deliberate. I broke the wax seal and drew out the contents. Several sheets of thick paper spilled onto the table, along with a smaller folded note. The first page was typed, formal, and at the top were the words, "Codicil to the last will and testament of Edward Harrison." My heart lurched. A codicil. An amendment to the will. Dated just 4 months before my father's death. I read with trembling eyes. "I hereby direct that the sum of $25 million be placed in a trust for my son Jasper Harrison, to be released upon the fulfillment of conditions outlined herein." I gripped the paper so tightly the edges cut into my skin. 25 million. My name. My father hadn't forgotten me after all. But the next lines made my stomach twist. "Said funds are tied to evidence of mismanagement and impropriety on the part of Trevor Harrison. Should such behavior be proven, Jasper is entitled to full access of the trust, and further equal claim to the estate." I blinked. Mismanagement? Impropriety? My father had suspected Trevor. He had left me not just money but a weapon, a chance to balance the scales if Trevor's corruption could be proven. I rifled through the remaining pages. Bank statements. Records of debts. Wire transfers with Trevor's signature. Buried beneath the numbers was a pattern, a trail leading to casinos in Las Vegas, luxury purchases hidden under shell companies, and loan sharks demanding repayment. My brother, the golden child, was drowning in secrets. The folded note at the bottom was handwritten. My father's penmanship, shaky but clear. "Jasper, I know how this must feel. I cannot undo the years I allowed distance to grow between us, but I trust you more than Trevor. If you are reading this, it means you have been tested, and you must decide whether to rise above or to sink to his level. Do not let greed consume you. Use the truth wisely." My throat closed up. For years, I had convinced myself I was invisible to my father. That Trevor's shadow was too long for me to ever matter. And yet here was proof that my father had seen me after all. I pressed the note to my chest and let the wave of conflicting emotions wash over me, grief, anger, relief, and a spark of something new, determination. But then as I scanned the documents again, a chill ran down my spine. There was one line scribbled in the margin of a bank record, in someone else's handwriting: "This cannot fall into the wrong hands." I froze. The man who had given me the envelope, who was he really? A lawyer? A banker? Or someone with his own stake in this? The cafe suddenly felt too loud, too crowded. I stuffed the papers back into the envelope and looked around. Every face seemed suspicious, every glance heavy. Were they watching me? I slipped out the back door and walked quickly toward my apartment, the envelope clutched under my jacket. My mind raced with possibilities. If Trevor knew I had this, he wouldn't just be angry. He'd be desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous. When I reached my building, I double-checked behind me before unlocking the door. The hallway was empty. Inside my apartment, I spread the documents across my desk, this time taking photos with my phone in case they were stolen. I labeled them carefully, my hands steady now. This was no longer just about inheritance. This was about survival and justice. Yet even as I documented everything, one thought kept gnawing at me. Why hadn't the lawyer in that office mentioned this codicil? Was it hidden? Destroyed? Or deliberately suppressed? And if someone had tried to bury it once, what would they do now that I had it in my possession? That night as I finally collapsed into bed, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment made me sit up. Every sound from the street felt like footsteps coming for me. Sometime after midnight, I finally drifted into a shallow sleep, only to be jolted awake by a loud thud from my living room. My heart stopped. I wasn't alone. 2 days later, Trevor threw a party at the Westwood mansion. It was his grand display of triumph, a celebration of his inheritance, an opportunity to show the world he had arrived. I knew I shouldn't go, but something inside me demanded it. I had to see him, to look him in the eye, to remind myself of the truth I now carried. The mansion loomed like a fortress, glowing under strings of lights and the soft hum of expensive music. Luxury cars lined the driveway, laughter spilled out onto the manicured lawns, and servers carried trays of champagne to guests in glittering gowns. I kept to the shadows as I slipped inside. The place smelled of fresh roses and polished wood, and the walls were adorned with family portraits that made me feel like an intruder in my own bloodline. I spotted Trevor near the grand staircase, surrounded by admirers. He looked every bit the golden son, his arms slung around his girlfriend, a glass raised high as he basked in applause. The sight of him made my stomach twist. All I could think of were the documents back at my apartment. The unpaid loans, the casino transfers, the looming collapse he was desperately hiding. I moved closer, pretending to be just another guest. That's when I heard it, Trevor laughing with a group of businessmen. "Father trusted me with everything," he boasted, his words dripping arrogance. Jasper? He was never cut out for this world. Always weak, always second best. That's why the old man left him nothing. He knew the truth. A few of the men chuckled politely. My face burned hot. Weak. Second best. He was rewriting history in front of strangers, turning me into a ghost who had never mattered. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to shout, to throw the truth in his face right then and there. But no. Timing was everything. If I played my cards too soon, Trevor would crush me before I had a chance to strike. Instead, I mingled. I slipped from room to room, noting the lavish decorations, the art, the expensive wine. It was all a facade, a palace built on quicksand. Near the library, I overheard a hushed conversation. Trevor's voice again, this time sharper, urgent. "Listen," he snapped at a man I didn't recognize. "I don't care what it takes. Those files cannot resurface. If Jasper has them, I want them back. Do you understand? Pay whoever you need, just get them back." My blood ran cold. So he knew. Someone had told him I had the envelope. And he wasn't just worried, he was terrified. I slipped away before they could see me, my heart pounding. Trevor's empire was already cracking, and he knew it. That was my advantage. But it also meant I was in danger. I left the mansion quietly, unnoticed in the swirl of music and laughter, but the words I had heard echoed in my head. Trevor wouldn't stop until he had destroyed me. Back in my apartment, I spread the documents out once again. Every number, every signature, every transfer spoke of corruption. The codicil was clear. If Trevor's impropriety could be proven, not only would I gain the trust fund, but I would have equal claim to the estate. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about vindication. About finally being seen. But I needed allies. Someone who could help me bring this to light without Trevor silencing it. The answer came faster than I expected. The next morning, an email appeared in my inbox from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "We need to talk about your brother." I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. The message was brief. "I know what Trevor is hiding. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Rosewood Cafe. Come alone." My stomach tightened. Whoever this was, they knew something. Maybe even more than I did. But as I stared at the screen, a thought chilled me to the bone. What if it was a trap? Rosewood Cafe was the kind of place where secrets could sit between cups and no one would notice. I arrived 10 minutes early, chose the back corner, and kept my eyes on the door. At noon sharp, a woman in a gray blazer stepped in, scanned the room, and walked straight to me as if we'd arranged this for years. "Jasper?" she asked. "Yes." "I'm Marion Cole," she said, sliding into the booth. "Your father's former compliance counsel. Off the books." A muscle in my jaw twitched. My father didn't trust our official counsel? He trusted them to do what was legal, she said. Not what was right. Marion placed a slim flash drive on the table and a folded document beside it. Her hands were steady, but there was fatigue in her eyes, the kind you get from keeping someone else's lies from boiling over. "Your brother was siphoning funds through 3 shelf companies," she said softly. "At first the amounts were small. Then he got bold. Vegas, debt servicing, luxury assets disguised as strategic marketing. Your father had me document everything. Why didn't he act?" "He was dying," Marion answered. "He was afraid any move would tear the family apart before he could make provisions. That codicil you have, that was his compromise. But Trevor intercepted drafts. He had help, inside the firm." My stomach dropped. So the will we heard was the only version the firm would defend without a scandal, she finished. "Your father left a trail outside the firm. To me. To a banker he trusted. And to one other person. The man who handed me the envelope?" Marion's gaze held mine. "His name is Archer Lane. Your father's oldest friend. And the executor named in the codicil." I stared at the flash drive. A key small enough to be lost in a pocket, heavy enough to break a dynasty. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "To do what your father hoped you would," she said. "Not to destroy your brother for sport, but to stop him before he destroys everything else. There's a way to do this quietly. We gather proof, secure an injunction, and force the court to recognize the codicil without a tabloid circus." I thought of Trevor's party, the laughter, the clink of glasses, the hollow palace he'd built on other people's names. Quiet sounded merciful. Maybe too merciful. But I wasn't here to play executioner. I was here to be seen, finally, as something other than the family's shadow. Where do we start? I said. Marion's plan was a lattice of pressure points. First, redundancy. I uploaded the drive to 3 encrypted vaults, printed essentials and placed copies in 2 safe deposit boxes under aliases Marion had prepared. Second, verification. We met Omar Reyes, a forensic accountant with eyes that could measure deceit to the decimal. He cross-checked the transfers against vendor IDs, traced IPs on authorization emails, matched timestamps with Trevor's travel logs. Third, leverage. Marion contacted Helena Voss, a private banker who owed my father a favor and had grown tired of Trevor's late-night demands to reclassify certain wires. None of this looked like revenge. It looked like tidying a house someone had kicked in, one shard at a time. It was quiet, methodical, almost disappointingly calm. But beneath that calm I could feel the ground shifting. 2 nights later I tested the floor. I sent Trevor a simple text. "We need to talk." "I know." His reply took 3 minutes. "Know what?" I waited. "You tell me." He called, voice sharp. "Drop the game, Jasper. If you're sniffing around my finances, you're wasting your time. Father left me everything because you were never capable." "Capable of what?" I asked quietly. "Hiding debts with shell companies? Signing wires at 2:13 a.m. from a hotel in Henderson? Or was it capable of smiling while you bled the estate dry?" Silence. Then a hiss. "You don't have proof. Would you like me to CC you on the auditor's report?" I asked. "Omar could use your comments." He hung up. Marion called within the hour. "Prepare for pushback," she warned. "When men like Trevor feel the net, they thrash." The thrashing began as nuisances: a stranger loitering by my building, a car that appeared in my rearview mirror too often, a letter from a boutique law firm threatening defamation if I persisted in false allegations. We documented everything, stacked every threat on a neat pile labeled retaliation. Then the floorboards groaned. At 3 a.m. my apartment door lock scraped. I was already awake. My body had learned the sound of danger, and when the silhouette spilled across my floor, I flicked on the lamp in the camera I'd stationed on a shelf. The intruder froze. I didn't yell, didn't lunge. I simply lifted my phone and snapped a photo with the flash full on. He bolted. 5 minutes later, Marion had the footage backed up, time-stamped, and forwarded to a detective she trusted. "Quiet doesn't mean passive," she said. "Quiet means precise." In the days that followed, our file grew fat and irrefutable. Helena traced a chain of advisory retainer payments to a casino credit desk. Omar mapped a pretty constellation of transfers that looked innocuous until you noticed they always landed the night before Trevor's trips. Marion found an email thread in which a junior associate at the firm misfiled the codicil, an error that coincidentally required the doc to be re-notarized later, which of course never happened. With Archer's help, we secured a hearing, ex parte, to freeze key accounts pending a full review. The date landed faster than I expected, 1 week out. It felt both too soon and terribly late. On the morning of the hearing, the city wore a thin, white light like a veil. I dressed slowly, choosing a suit that fit the man I wanted the judge to see, not wealthy, not bitter, not reckless, just steady. I tucked my father's shaky note into my inner pocket. Use the truth wisely. Outside the courthouse, a news van idled. Trevor hadn't come alone. He'd brought optics, tailored suit, charming smile, a PR handler whispering in his ear. When he saw me, he smirked. "Still chasing ghosts, Jasper? This is embarrassing." "Only if you're afraid of what the living might say," I replied. He leaned in. "You won't win. You never have." Marion touched my elbow, steering me through security. "Don't let him set the tone," she murmured. "We have the facts. Judges like facts." The courtroom was colder than the hallway, its walls lined with dark paneling that made the space feel both solemn and intimate. The clerk called the case. We rose. Trevor flashed that television smile at the bench, the one that had bought him forgiveness his whole life. Then the door to chambers opened and the judge walked in. What happened next was not part of any plan. He paused on the threshold, his gaze landing on me first. Not on Trevor, not on Marion, not on the cameras. On me. His expression shifted, surprise, then something like recognition, and he faltered ever so slightly before taking the bench. "Good morning," he said. His voice was composed, but I heard the ripple beneath. "Counsel, appearances?" Marion spoke our names. Trevor's attorney announced his with theatrical polish. The judge's eyes returned to me. He leaned forward a fraction. "Mr. Harrison," he said slowly, "would you approach the bench for a moment?" Trevor's lawyer bristled. "Your Honor." "Counsel," the judge said not unkindly, "I'll address you in due course." I walked, heart beating a steady drum against my ribs, aware of every camera lens pivoting. Up close, the judge's face softened. "I knew your father," he said under his breath, low enough the microphones wouldn't catch. "And I know who buried that codicil." My breath stopped. Across the room, Trevor's smile finally cracked. "Mr. Harrison," the judge continued, voice now carrying, formal again, "for reasons the court will state on the record, we will proceed today on the narrow question of preservation of assets. But understand this, the truth has a way of finding its proper forum." His gavel tapped once, crisp as a match struck in the dark. "Clerk," he said, "seal the room." The doors swung shut with a heavy click. And in that sealed silence, with Trevor's world suspended on a thread, I realized something profound and terrifying at once. This wasn't just my quiet revenge anymore. It was my father's last move, finally landing. The sound of the doors sealing echoed like a verdict in itself. The courtroom felt smaller, air thicker, as if the walls knew secrets were about to spill. Trevor's smirk had wilted into something tighter, his knuckles white around the edge of the table. For once he didn't look untouchable. The judge adjusted his glasses, scanning the docket. "We are here to consider interim measures regarding the Harrison estate, pending clarification of contested documents. Counsel, proceed." Marion rose with a calm that belied the storm she was about to unleash. "Your Honor, we submit into evidence a codicil dated April 3rd of this year, signed by Edward Harrison and notarized by Archer Lane, the named executor. Additionally, we present supporting financial records indicating mismanagement of estate assets by Mr. Trevor Harrison." She laid a binder on the clerk's desk with surgical precision. Inside it were months of late-night work, Omar's charts, Helena's sworn statements, screenshots of wire transfers, the shaky note my father had written with my name on it. Trevor's lawyer scoffed. "Your Honor, we object to this ambush. The supposed codicil was not part of the estate file, and these documents are cherry-picked to smear my client." The judge leaned forward. "Ambush? Counselor, the court is obligated to review material evidence, especially where fraud may have tainted probate proceedings. Your objection is noted and overruled." Trevor shifted in his seat, trying to catch my eye, as if one glare could undo the weight of truth pressing down on him. I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the forgotten son. Marion continued, page after page, voice steady as she detailed shell companies, casino ledgers, repayment demands from loan sharks, even the late-night attempted break-in at my apartment. Each piece clicked into place like a lock turning. Then she read my father's handwritten note aloud. "Jasper, I know how this must feel. Use the truth wisely." The courtroom was silent except for her voice. My throat tightened as the words washed over me again. When she finished, the judge turned to Trevor. "Mr. Harrison, do you have anything to say in response?" Trevor stood, a man cornered. His voice was strained. "This is all circumstantial. My father wanted me to carry on his legacy. Jasper was always weak. He could never." The judge cut him off. "This court is not interested in character assassinations. We deal in facts. And the facts presented today are substantial enough to merit immediate action." He signed an order right there, his pen scratching across the paper like thunder. "Effective immediately, all estate assets are frozen pending full review. Furthermore, the codicil will be examined for authenticity and legal enforcement. This matter is not concluded, but I will not allow potential fraud to poison these proceedings further." Trevor's face drained of color. His lawyer whispered furiously, but it didn't matter. The tide had turned. I felt my pulse slow, a calm settling over me. Not triumph, not yet, but vindication. For once, I wasn't invisible. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Microphones thrust forward, voices calling. "Jasper, did your brother steal from the estate? Do you think the codicil will hold up? Are you the rightful heir?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The story would tell itself now. That evening, I returned to my apartment, the envelope still on my desk. I opened it one last time, running my fingers over my father's note. His words felt less like a burden now and more like a promise. I poured myself a glass of water, sat by the window, and looked out at the city. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a shadow. I felt like a man who had stepped into his rightful place. Trevor's empire would crumble piece by piece in the weeks that followed. The mansion, the cars, the accounts, each tied to debts he could no longer bury. The world would see him for who he truly was. As for me, the court would decide how much of the fortune I would receive. But I already knew the real inheritance wasn't the money or the estate or even the vindication. It was the truth. And it was mine now. What about you? Would you forgive a brother who betrayed you, or would you take everything back like I did? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.